The most powerful move in this entire situation didn't come from T.I. It didn't come from King Harris defending his mother. It didn't come from 50 Cent posting a meme after a grave photo. It didn't come from diss tracks or deleted posts or alleged paperwork. It came from someone who said absolutely nothing. Jay-Z. And before you dismiss that as a stretch, consider this. 50 Cent has been throwing jabs at Jay-Z for over 20 years. Memes, subtle digs, Grammy jokes, business critiques, comments designed to provoke a response. And in all that time, Jay has almost never taken the bait. No Instagram back and forth, no diss track, no podcast rant, no subtweet, just silence. Now look at what happened when T.I. and King Harris didn't choose silence. Look at where that ended up. And then ask yourself whether the most important lesson of this entire beef was sitting in plain sight the whole time, delivered not through lyrics, but through 2 decades of refusing to engage. To understand why that contrast matters so much, you have to trace how this situation escalated, and how fast a Versus disagreement turned into something involving a murdered mother's headstone. Ty claimed earlier this year that he and 50 had privately discussed doing a Versus battle. According to Tip, the plan was straightforward. He would float it publicly, 50 would confirm, and the culture would get a heavyweight catalog showdown between 2 men who defined the early 2000s. When T.I. went public with it, 50 created distance instead of confirming. For T.I., that wasn't a scheduling issue. It was a character issue. He went on record saying he no longer respected 50. And in hip-hop, that word carries specific weight between veterans who came up in an era where reputation mattered more than follower counts. 50 responded by calling T.I. King Rat in the comments. That phrase questions integrity, implies cooperation, and stains credibility in a culture where those things are currency. T.I. fired back, hinting at paperwork of his own. The Crime Stoppers commercial from T.Y.'s 2007 federal case got recirculated. Old courtroom footage surfaced. Snitch allegations flew both ways. For a moment, it looked like the whole thing was going to become a credibility war rooted in decade-old legal history. Then 50 changed the battlefield entirely. He posted an unflattering photo of Tiny Harris and warned T.I. to keep his name out of his mouth. Tiny wasn't part of the Versus argument. She hadn't spoken on snitch allegations. She hadn't challenged anyone publicly. She was uninvolved, and she became the target anyway. Some fans dismissed it as classic 50 trolling. Others recognized what it actually was, a calculated trigger. 50 has spent his career understanding that attacking a man's pride produces a response, but attacking his household guarantees one. T.I. responded in the comments, measured but firm. King Harris didn't respond that way. When King saw his mother trending for mockery in front of millions, he went live immediately. No delay, no strategy, just raw emotion. He fired directly at 50. Then, he went further than anyone expected. He posted what appeared to be an image of Sabrina Jackson's gravesite and told 50 to dig her up. To understand why that moment landed the way it did, you need to know who Sabrina Jackson actually was. She had Curtis when she was 15 years old. She raised him alone in South Jamaica, Queens, one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in New York during the crack era. By all accounts, she was tough and determined, trying to build something real in circumstances that made that nearly impossible. In 1983, when Curtis was 8 years old, she died in a fire. Authorities believed it was no accident, that she may have been drugged before gas was left running in the apartment. No arrests were ever made. The case was never solved. 50 has spoken across decades of interviews about how that loss shaped him, how every setback felt heavier without her there, how the hunger people see in him traces directly back to losing her at 8 years old. It's not a talking point, it's the foundation of who he became. When King posted that headstone, he wasn't firing a random shot. He was pressing on the deepest wound in 50's entire origin story. A murdered mother, an unsolved case, a childhood altered by a loss that never got justice. The internet froze. Some people said if you mock a man's wife publicly, you don't get to set limits on how he responds. Others said a murdered parent's grave is a line that shouldn't be crossed, regardless of what started it. Neither position was wrong. Neither position resolved anything. Everyone waited for 50 to explode. He posted a meme. Pepe the Frog. Caption, LOL. No emotional paragraph, no threats, no matching the energy. Just cold, deliberate indifference. That response is a pattern anyone who's watched 50 operate over 2 decades would recognize immediately. He provokes, then waits. When the other side goes emotional, he goes calm. When they raise their voice, he lowers his. The optics flip. The person reacting looks unstable. The person laughing looks in control. He ran the same play against Ja Rule, against Rick Ross, against Floyd Mayweather. Make the opponent look rattled while you look amused. By posting LOL after a grave photo, 50 shifted the narrative from "he crossed a line with Tiny" to "King went too far." Whether that shift was fair is a different argument. The point is, it worked. But here's what makes this whole situation more interesting than just another rap beef. There's one person who has been on the receiving end of 50's provocations longer than anyone and has never given him a single usable reaction. Jay-Z. The tension between them goes back to 1999 and How to Rob, a track where 50, as the hungry outsider, casually name-dropped Jay alongside a list of major rappers. Since then, over more than 2 decades, 50 has taken shots in multiple directions. Grammy commentary, business critiques, references to Beyoncé, jokes about producing a documentary about him. Calculated little provocations designed to get a response. Jay has almost never given him one. No Instagram engagement, no diss record, no interview clapback, no public acknowledgement that the jabs even landed. That's not accidental. It's a philosophy. Jay-Z operates like someone who understands that attention is currency, and silence is how you refuse to spend it on someone else's terms. When you don't respond, you don't elevate the person trying to get a rise out of you. When you don't engage, the noise fades on its own timeline instead of yours. He spent 2 decades demonstrating that the most powerful position in any conflict is often the one that appears least invested. The results speak for themselves. Jay runs Roc Nation. He's crossed into billionaire territory through music, business, and strategic positioning. He rarely appears rattled by anything. Meanwhile, every person who decided to match 50's energy, Ja Rule, Rick Ross, various others, eventually found themselves on the wrong end of a story 50 controlled entirely. Now look at how the T.I. situation played out through that lens. 50 posted Tiny. King reacted emotionally. King escalated to the grave. The internet spent days debating whether King crossed the line. 50 posted LOL and watched it burn. From a purely strategic standpoint, that sequence played out exactly the way 50's provocations always do when someone takes the bait. The more emotional the reaction, the more control shifts to the person who appeared calm. Intensity without strategy doesn't win public perception. It usually loses it. People online started speculating whether Jay-Z reached out privately, whether there was a phone call, a warning, some behind-the-scenes message to T.I. after King posted the grave. No confirmed evidence exists, no screenshots, no verified reports, nothing concrete that suggests a direct conversation happened. But the speculation itself says something. When fans start asking whether Jay intervened, what they're really asking is whether someone tried to deliver the lesson his career has already been teaching for 20 years. Don't wrestle in the mud with someone who lives there. Don't amplify someone who feeds entirely off reaction. Don't let pride override positioning when the person you're dealing with is a professional provocateur who has been running this exact playbook since before your son was old enough to have an Instagram account. That lesson was available to everyone watching. T.I. chose confrontation, King chose retaliation. Both had reasons that made sense in the moment: defending reputation, defending family, defending respect. None of those impulses are wrong, but 50 has built an entire career on understanding that when someone defends anything emotionally, he can redirect the story. Give him an emotional reaction, and he controls the frame. Give him a grave post, and he gets to post LOL, while the internet debates the person who posted it. The image that defined this entire beef wasn't the frog meme. It was the headstone, and the person whose name barely came up in any of it, who never posted, never commented, never appeared in a single clip from this situation, is still running Roc Nation and crossing billion-dollar thresholds, while 2 camps spend weeks explaining themselves to an audience that's already moved on to the next story. That's the move nobody talks about enough. Not the diss track, not the paperwork, not the deleted posts. The silence, because sometimes in hip-hop, the person who says the least controls the most. And that contrast between everyone who reacted and the one person who never does might be the clearest lesson this entire situation produced.